Stuckey-Hatchet, Chapter 14, Part 2. Mistakes. He tried to learn from the mistakes. He couldn't bury food again, couldn't leave it in the shelter, because something like a bear could get at it right away. It had to be high, somehow, high and safe. Above the door to the shelter, up the rock face about 10 feet, was a small ledge that could make a natural storage place, unreachable to animals, except that it was unreachable to him as well. A ladder, of course. He needed a ladder, but he had no way to fashion one, nothing to hold the steps on, and that stopped him until he found a dead pine with many small branches still sticking out. Using his hatchet, he chopped the branches off so they stuck out 4 or 5 inches, all up along the log. Then he cut the log off about 10 feet long and dragged it down to his shelter. It was a little heavy but dry, and he could manage it, and when he propped it up, he found he could climb to the ledge with ease, though the tree did roll from side to side of it as he climbed. His food shelf, as he thought of it, had been covered with bird manure, and he carefully scraped it clean with sticks. He had never seen birds there, but that was probably because the smoke from his fire went up right across the opening, and they didn't like the smoke. Still, he had learned, and he took time to weave a snug door for the small opening with green willows, cutting it so it jammed in tightly, and when he finished, he stood back and looked at the rock face, his shelter below, the food shelf above, and allowed a small bit of pride to come. Not bad, he thought. Not bad for somebody who used to have trouble greasing the bearings on his bicycle. Not bad at all. Mistakes. He had made a good shelter and food shelf, but he had no food except for fish and the last of the berries, and the fish, as good as they still tasted then, were not something he could store. His mother had left some salmon out by mistake one time when they went on an overnight trip to Cape Hesper to visit relatives, and when they got back, the smell filled the whole house. There was no way to store fish. At least, he thought, no way to store them dead. But as he looked at the weave of his structure, a thought came to him, and he moved down to the water. He had been putting the waste from the fish back in the water, and the food had attracted hundreds of new ones. I wonder. They seemed to come easily to the food, at least the small ones. He had no trouble now shooting them, and had even speared one with his old fish spear now that he knew. He had no trouble now shooting them, and had even speared one with his old fish spear now that he knew to aim low. He could dangle something in his fingers, and they came right up to it. It might be possible, he thought. Might just be possible to trap them. Make some kind of pond. To his right, at the base of the rock bluff, there were piles of smaller rocks that had fallen from the main chunk, splinters and hunks from double fist size to some as large as his head. He spent an afternoon carrying rocks to the beach and making what amounted to a large pen for holding live fish, 2 rock arms that stuck out 15 feet into the lake and curved together at the end. Where the arms came together, he left an opening about 2 feet across. Then he sat on the shore and waited. When he had first started dropping the rocks, all the fish had darted away. But his fish trash pile of bones and skin and guts was in the pond area, and the prospect of food brought them back. Soon, under an hour, there were 30 or 40 small fish in the enclosure, and Brian made a gate by weaving small willows together into a fine mesh and closed them in. "Fresh fish!" he had yelled. "I have fresh fish for sale!" Storing live fish to eat later had been a major breakthrough, he thought. It wasn't just keeping from starving. It was trying to save ahead, think ahead. Of course, he didn't know then how sick he would get of fish.